This week, the name on the marquee has got to be Josh Emmett, who this past weekend defeated Calvin Kattar by a split decision, earning a 48-47 and a 48-47 at UFC Fight Night. Kattar versus Emmett. Mark, let me throw it over to you first. What was your take on the fight, the split decision? Let us know.
It was a good fight. It was a competitive fight. It wasn't quite the war that maybe we expected it to be when we saw this on paper and when we kind of built it up last week. And I think that's mainly because Calvin Kattar didn't fight the way that we expected him to fight, which I also think is the reason that he lost that fight. Like, Calvin Kattar against Giga Chikadze returned after this long layoff from losing to Max Holloway, and he came back and showed off this new, like, come-forward pressure style, didn't let Giga breathe, strikes in his face, the whole thing. And I thought it was that he had kind of flipped a switch after the Max Holloway loss where he was like, I can't be like the passive, fight behind the jab technique type fighter. Like, I got to go because guys are going to get ahead of me like Max did. I got to be the one on offense. And I kind of thought he had unlocked this new style for himself. And maybe you guys did as well. Mm-hmm. And I'm now realizing that may have simply been like a matchup-based opening that he saw against Giga because he did not fight that way against Josh Emmett. He fought like we've seen Calvin Kattar fight before, which is not necessarily bad. It's just not this new high level of Calvin Kattar that I thought had kind of arrived on the scene. But he played that more patient boxing game. He worked behind his jab, and it was working. It was a beautiful jab. It was landing all fight. You see Josh Emmett's face right now. It looks like garbage. Yeah. But Emmett was willing to play like the patient lunge in and out with flurries game that he loves to play. Mm-hmm. And because of that, we got a good fight, a close fight, but they were both kind of playing that game, and it turned out to not be the war that we really thought we were going to get. Calvin was smooth. He had good head movement. He rolled with a lot of Josh's strikes. Like, they looked like they were landing big, but he was kind of rolling. They weren't necessarily hurting him that much. Like I said, he worked beautifully behind the jab. Mm-hmm. It just felt like he never truly hit the gas in that fight. Like, I kept thinking it was coming, and it just didn't come. And Emmett, you got to give him credit. Like, he's shorter. He has a shorter reach. He's got less natural boxing skill. But he still found a way to beat Calvin Kattar in what was primarily a boxing match. Like, he's just really tricky with the way that he kind of lunges in and puts these flurries on you, like to multiple targets, like body, head, different sides, different angles, before you can react. And he's landed like 4 punches on you, and then he's back out with these flurries. So he's got a little bit of a tricky game for people to figure out. As for the cards, obviously it was a close fight. Calvin losing felt tough to me for a few reasons. One, I thought he won the fight if it was scored as a whole. So once again, I think pride rules would have had us arrive at a result that I liked more. Two, there were 3 clear rounds in that fight, and they were 3, 4, and 5. 3 was Emmett's, 4 and 5 were Kattar's. So he had 2 of the 3 clear rounds. 1 and 2 were both toss-up rounds. So when you see that, it just feels a little tough when Kattar loses the fight. But rounds 1 and 2 were razor-close rounds, and they come down to preference, and they come down to what judges thought landed or what they may have missed landing. And, by definition of close rounds, it's very possible that they both end up going against you. And that's exactly what happened on one judge's card. Another judge did give the second to Kattar, and that's the one that had him winning. But the real problem here for me was that one judge gave the second to Kattar, and he didn't give him 4, which is just mind-blowing because 4 was the most obvious round of the entire fight, and it was for Calvin Kattar. And if he would have got that round on the judge's card, he wins that decision. So he can't be losing that fight because he doesn't get the 4th round. Like, we can't have that. There's got to be a better way to do judging. Like, I don't know what it is. Like, maybe we get them away from cage side, like put them in a room with a TV and a headset, and they can have a better chance of actually seeing what's landing. Like, I mean, I'm grasping at straws here, but I just can't imagine a world where someone watched that 4th round and said, yeah, that one's a check for Josh Emmett. Like, it's not even possible. So, I don't know. Personally, live, I thought Kattar got 2, 4, 5, but once I rewatched, I am okay with all of 1, 2, 3 going to Emmett. So I get it. He gets the win. the one judge annoyed me, but big win for Josh Emmett and his career.
Feels like we talk about judging almost every week now.
Yeah. And again, I to be clear, I don't mind the result. It just can't be because Kattar didn't get round 4.
Right. Omar, let's bring you in. What were your thoughts on the fight overall? And do you think that the rightful athlete came away the winner?
No, I do not.
Oh.
I had
No, I
it.
do not.
I had it for Kattar. I had 2, 4, and 5 for Kattar in that fight. For me, a lot of these fights were. I mean, 1 and 2 were of the 5 rounds the closest, but I still thought that they were still pretty definitive as to who's got those rounds. The real issue that I had too is I think we talked about it the night of together in the text messages was the fact that I think the judges are scoring things that are not happening.
Yep,
and they
I
might
agree.
perceive it as happening. There was a lot of shots that went right off of Kattar's arms, right off of his biceps, that he was able to kind of even parry with his forearm and his elbow. And it just and I wonder, and the sound that comes off of any Emmett strike that lands on any part of any flesh is going to sound like a thud, like a big impact. And I just wonder if those things make a bigger impact in the judge's mind than frankly they should.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
I don't think I think when we look at damage as a whole, I think as messed up as Kattar was, I'm pretty sure Emmett was messed up just a bit more. I do think Kattar controlled most of the fight. I think there was a lot of lunging and almost kind of Hail Marying for a lot of that fight for Emmett. He did land a lot of solid shots, though. I mean, Kattar's face, clearly he landed. But I do think that there were a lot of shots that didn't land as cleanly as people or judges might have thought that they did. With that being said, it was a fun fight to watch. I did enjoy watching the fight. It was a hell of a fight. I agree it wasn't the scrappy war, perhaps, that maybe we thought it was going to be, but I thought it was a very back-and-forth fight. Neither one of those guys were giving an inch. And Kattar did try to come forward, but just Emmett got to a point where when he got to like 3 steps, once he gave 2 or 3 steps, he just said, fuck it, and he bit down on his mouthpiece and he threw a few, and then we were, kind of back in the center to a certain extent. So,
Yeah.
It was a good game plan for Emmett to kind of not allow Kattar to push him all the way back, and Emmett and Kattar didn't really adjust to it as well as he should have in order to kind of steal the show, if you will. But I do think he did enough to win the fight.
I mean, guys, remember, I'll just point out, in my experience, being ringside or cage side as an announcer, very often I've gotten to sit right next to judges. I mean, sometimes I sit on different sides sometimes. Sometimes I'm next to, like, the timekeeper who's ringing the bell. But very often I'm sitting right next to a judge. And it's old school. It's not like entered into a computer system. And they're not tracking anything. They're not there's no lists. There's no screens in front of them that's showing them CompuStrike numbers. They just sit there with their hand over a slip of paper, which is the little, it's like that big usually, little score sheet. And they just watch the round. And when the bell rings, almost immediately, they don't sit there and like think about the round. They don't talk to anybody about it. They just turn their slip of paper over, take their pen, and write 10-9, and turn it right back over, and wait the rest of like the 50 seconds of the between round break. And that's it.
All of that is as it should be. Like, I don't want them to have strike numbers in front of them. I think those numbers don't tell the correct story a lot of the time. I don't even want to get cute. Point. I just wish there was a way to ensure that they are seeing more clearly, because you get the fighters on the other side of the cage, someone's back is to you, and you think 2 punches land because they make a sound and they're kind of blocked by the fighter's back, and really neither one of them landed. It's a big deal. So I wish there was a way to get past that. I just don't know what that way is. The only thing I can think is that they don't watch the live fight. They watch on video where there's maybe better angles, but like I'm sure that has its own problems. So I don't know what the answer is. It's just frustrating because I think that fight, as Omar said, and we were saying in the text that night, I think that fight was a big example of them thinking Josh Emmett landed more than he landed.
Yeah. Let's talk about where these two gentlemen are going to go from here off of this split decision results. Let's start with the winner, Josh Emmett. Mark, let me stick with you here. At featherweight, it's kind of a stacked division right now. And where do you want Emmett to go here? He's kind of knocking on the door of the upper echelon of featherweight, and good for Josh Emmett, by the way, because he's an exciting fighter. He's a fan favorite for good reason. I am happy for him. I wish that both these guys could have come away with a win somehow. But so where do you think Emmett should go here from here?
So I kind of always feel this way, but I still feel this way right now. And it's that I feel like I view Josh Emmett differently than most of the public. Like, he's calling for a title shot. I'm seeing a lot of people saying, oh, do you give Josh Emmett the winner of this title fight? And I'm like, well, I don't even consider that. Like, I don't know what it is. I don't think he is that close to deserving a title fight. So, you know, it's a stacked division. Like, I get it that he's doing well, but I just don't think we're there yet. I think undefeated guys like Bryce Mitchell and Arnold Allen have just as much of a claim to a title shot as he does. I don't think he has any resume that stands out so much above their resumes. Mm-hmm. So, personally, we've suggested some other fights for those guys. I think I'd kind of like to see one of them get paired with Josh Emmett. I think that's where I would go, Bryce Mitchell or Arnold Allen.
Nice. Omar?
Do we actually know what's going on with Chan Sung Jung at this point?
No,
I think I did hear that he wants to fight one more, but I'm not 100% positive. I feel like I did hear that.
Okay. I mean, he's got a number 4 spot, and I would be hard-pressed, as much as I don't think Josh Emmett deserves a title shot, I would be hard-pressed to give him somebody behind him at this point, especially if he ends up moving up to what I'm going to assume is the number 5 spot that he's going to take from Kattar.
It's updated, so we can look. I'll pull it up right now.
Kattar.
I don't know why I want to say Kattar.
Yeah, Josh Emmett is number 4 in the UFC's new rankings.
Wow.
Kattar stayed at 5, and Zombie fell to 6.
That makes sense.
Oh,
I guess.
Okay.
My rankings are pretty different than this, but yeah.
Well, in that case, everybody else in front of him has basically been booked, so... With that in mind, I guess, yes, I'll go with Arnold Allen or Bryce Mitchell. Probably Arnold Allen.
How about a guy who just came off a win? He's undefeated in the UFC, 16-0, undefeated as a pro, Movsar Evloev.
I thought about that, but I didn't include him with those names just because he's a little lower on the list, kind of how Omar was just alluding to. But, I mean, you could put him right in that bunch with Mitchell and Allen.
Totally.
What does the UFC have Arnold Allen at right now?
Allen is 7.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking right here. Arnold Allen also undefeated in the UFC, 18-1 overall. Wow.
I will say for Emmett, he could end up in a bigger fight if things play out the right way. Like, for example, say Volk beats Holloway, and that chapter is done. And say it's Ortega that beats Yair. You know, if Yair beats Ortega, we haven't seen Volk Yair. They're probably going to go that way. But say it's Ortega that wins. Then you might end up with like, okay, are we going to do Volk Ortega again right away? Then maybe you end up saying, okay, Ortega Josh Emmett. You know, like there's a way, if things work the right way, where he might end up with a huge name, but we kind of got to see how things play.
Totally. Let's talk about Calvin Kattar here. Now, he wasn't a big loser. He lost in a split decision. So, Omar, let me go to you here first. Once again, same situation, really. Featherweight is stacked, especially at the top of featherweight. Who would you want Calvin Kattar to fight next?
So I think at this point, he should probably fight the one who doesn't get Josh Emmett. So we were kind of talking about Arnold Allen and Bryce Mitchell. I think one of those guys definitely deserves to fight, at minimum, Calvin Kattar at this point to see if they stack up.
Mr. Priel?
Yeah, I think you could go plenty of ways with him. Exactly what Omar said is possible. I think he could get the loser of that Ortega and Yair fight If you want to kind of keep him on a high level, he could be the one that fights Zombie. You know, I feel like he's an easy guy to match up. You can slot him in a lot of places right now.
God, featherweight. Excuse me. Featherweight is so good. And like deep into the teens, it's just killers everywhere you look.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, let's move on. Congrats to Josh Emmett for getting it done by split decision and earning his spot this week. The first time ever